First, I just want to make a comment that, this movie has these universal themes, obviously, of overcoming things in life in general, attacking something and overcoming it. People connect to that. There's this universal theme of trying to please your parents, where you can just kind of feel the groans and the laughter in the audience and it's painful, and I don't want to drill it into you, but and they're not there in the scene, and how you struggled, it seemed like, to perform in front of them, and so there's all these universal themes that grab people. I think the thing that really grabbed Ian and I, that grabs artists, is you talk about feeling like an extraterrestrial. And that's how artists feel all the time. Growing up, nobody understood us. We didn't understand. We don't understand why other people do or think the way they are. And it was really great to see you kind of find your brotherhood in the same way that we have found ours. And we're just excited to bring you into our community and welcome you into our brotherhood. So thanks for coming. These guys traveled a long way, traveled from New York yesterday, and got stuck in airports and had allergic reactions and terrible things. And
only one.
Only one, which was singular, allergic reaction. So far the night is young, sir. So I'm wondering, maybe this question for you, Ryan. How did you guys meet?
Dave, who directed the film, and I have been working together for a really long time. In New York, and we were looking for a subject to make a short film about because work was slow. We're both directors of photography, and work was slow, so we were kind of looking for our own project, and we had been pitching each other ideas, and Dave lives in the same building as Chris. And Dave was downstairs doing laundry with his dog. He has a little French bulldog named Gizmo, and it's also in the same area that Chris's cage is in. So there was a clanging around the corner, and the dog runs around the corner, and Dave follows the dog, and the dog is sitting in the middle of Chris's cage amongst all of this bent steel. And Chris is standing there, and there's bent hammers and nails on the wall. And it's a very strange scene if you don't know what he's doing down there. A little bit of a horror scene. So Dave picks his dog up, apologizes, and Chris says, it's okay, she's just curious, in a very soft, creepy voice, I think. And Dave walked away with the dog, and then a week later he saw him in the elevator and asked him more about what he was doing, and Chris explained, and then Dave brought the idea to me, and we decided, based on just the subject of bending steel alone, it would be an interesting short film. And then from there, once we spent more time with Chris, we realized that the depth of his character could sustain a feature-length film, and that's kind of how it all unfolded.
So I could see, if I would have met Chris and seen that world, I would have had the same response as you. We have to make a film about this. But when you were trying to bring other people on board, I imagine it was just you and Dave for the most part. Yeah. Did anybody else get it? Or was it difficult to, explain, hey, this guy's going to bend steel and we're going to make a feature about it?
Yeah,
I think if we were looking for funding, people would have looked at us like we were absolutely nuts, which luckily we didn't really actually need too much funding throughout the production process because it was just Dave and I, and we had the capacity to do it ourselves. Once we got into it, we cut a teaser and we started showing it to people that we wanted to work on the film, our editor, our composer, graphics, and our sound mix. And the guys, all of the guys who worked on this film, that it's either their first or second feature film. So they were more than happy to kind of take this project on because they really saw value in it, which was exactly what we wanted. We wanted people who weren't doing it for money or weren't doing it for the fame of it. We're just doing it because they actually believed it was a really strong film. And we were lucky enough to get really, really talented people on board. Our editor, John Hoyt, brought a subtlety to the film. It's a very slow burn. We wanted it to unravel in front of the audience the same way that we saw Chris's journey unravel, and he did an amazing job. Our composer did an absolutely fantastic job of making an understated score that still creates this tension that you feel throughout the film, but you don't really realize what's going on. And then the animation and, sound mix, sound design, those are all things that just added, and it really, really incredibly talented people that had just not had the opportunity to make a feature before, much like us, and so, there were like 4 or 5 people that came on board based on the, believing in the movie the same way we did, and it just worked out really perfectly.
I'm going to ask Chris a question. It's an obvious question, but I'm asking myself the whole time, I'm watching the movie. How did you get into bending things?
Everybody seems to ask that question, and as the interviews progress, it changes a little bit. But for an elevator pitch, I would say probably I started 3 months of bending steel as an alternative to lifting weights, sort of dynamic tension. And I would push against immovable pieces of metal. And I'd get stronger. And finally something gave. And I said, that shouldn't have bent. And I brought it into the gym and no one could make heads or tails of it. And I looked around on the internet and I found somebody in Philadelphia, outside Philadelphia. And he did this as a avocation. And he invited me down to his welding shop. So I went down to his welding shop and he laid out lots of items on the table and he said, well, let's see what you can bend. And I was bending this, I was bending that, and he said, man, you've got something special there. And that was the first time somebody ever said something to me like that, unsolicited. And it felt so good to bend those objects and to bend bars. He recommended I get in touch with a mentor. And that mentor was the gentleman you saw pull a truck with the long hair in the film. And we started a very close relationship. And I got introduced to most of the other people in this little group, probably a tight little 18 or 20 guys. And it's true, they have become a bit of a family. I feel an obligation to call them, and they call me. And
On Sundays?
On Sundays, just not John on Saturdays. But it changed my life, and it reconnected me with people. And for a long time, I was deliberately not connected. I stayed away from people or uncomfortable situations, family situations. I learned that you'd say something very not correct, and you wouldn't get invited back, and that was my goal. But I sort of changed that. I'm not the life of the party, but I feel a lot more comfortable. I've met a whole new group of people, and they really opened up the world for me. So I'm very grateful to it. And it's really because of Gizmo, the little dog. I still high-five the dog. I say, high five, and he sticks up his paw. So I just have a relationship with, I like that dog very much.
Have your parents seen the movie?
No, they haven't seen the movie. I would have liked for them to take a little more interest in the project by now. They've seen some of the newspaper articles. I don't know. It's I expect it's something that they don't entirely understand, and it's not a conventional occupation. And it's not like being a lawyer or doctor or something like that. How do you go to a group of people and say, "Well, my son, tears these cards," and it just. So it's wrong for me to put people of that generation on the spot and expect for them to, instantly have an appreciation for this stuff.
But you spoke with your mom on the way here, right? Like on the phone. Your parents
I
know
did.
That your parents that know that you're traveling for the movie.
Yes.
Do they understand how significant it's been for you to do all this stuff?
I don't know. That's a good question. We don't discuss a whole lot about the movie at home. I've tried to bring it up, and it's like everybody's eating soup and like the spoon drops, and you just change the subject. But, I don't really know what they think. I know that I bent a few things for my parents, and I left them in certain spots in the house, and they get moved around here and there. So I think they're now somewhat interested in it, and they're glad I found something, and they're from the old school, And you really can't expect them to come forward and say, you know, I was wrong. You're just not gonna get that, and it's wrong to expect it. But I know from where the objects are going, you know, they're on different tables and stuff, they're looking at them. And they're somewhat intrigued by it, and they don't want to admit that they want to get on the computer and look at the teaser. And I know that, and that's okay. It isn't said, but I see it, and I think they've come around as far as I can expect.
I was curious whether the last scene was recreated or was it live and real and, you know, filmed on site as depicted?
I think I can answer that.
Oh yeah, that was real. That was more real than we would have liked it to be, probably. So that show was planned, and it was going to happen, and then the hurricane happened, and we were all very concerned that it wasn't going to happen. So there was a lot of things that were going on in all of our minds, I think, you know. And the night before, Dave and I sat with Chris at the foot of his bed and talked about how far, you know, he had come and what the process meant to all of us. And then that day, we weren't sure whether he was going to try it, the bar. And that whole show was the first time that they had actually brought the Strongman back to Coney Island, and all those guys were really there, and they were all really doing that stuff. And Chris really tried that bar for the first time, and it bent. And Dave and I were behind the stage. We had a few camera crews there, but Dave and I were behind the stage. And I don't know if you could tell, but there was a wall behind the stage. So I actually had to hold the camera up over my head, and Dave had the boom mic up. So he couldn't see, and I could only see based on a very tiny 2-inch screen on the camera. And once the bar started to bend, the audience reacted, and then Dave and I reacted, and he lowered the boom mic, and my camera was shaking, and I turned to him and I said, "Holy fuck, it's starting to bend." And so he was like, "Oh, this is happening." So that moment was, you know, kind of the same. I would hope the same way that you guys all experienced it. It was a surprise to us, and incredibly emotional for us, and I think probably a surprise to Chris as well.
I tried to bend that bar that morning, probably about 6 o'clock or so, and I pulled like hell, and I kept laying it down on the ground, saying, "Yeah, you see a little daylight in there. It's bent just a little bit. It wasn't bent at all." But I had tried bending that bar for a long, long time, and it didn't move, and I think most people in the know did not expect me to bend that bar. And I didn't know this, but now I know it. There are people outside the place plotting what to do if I didn't bend that bar. So everybody there was saying, what are we going to do when he doesn't bend the bar? But somebody said, listen, if you get up on stage and do something and it doesn't work out, they better carry you off stage. And so I had foxhole faith, and I was just pulling as hard as I could. And once I felt that go just a little bit, there was a voice in me telling me, it's going, and once it starts going, you gotta keep pulling on it, otherwise it gets harder. The bar still is a very precious thing to me. I've had lady friends say, well, you know, it's me or the bar. As you can tell, I'm still single. I spend a great deal of time sort of looking at that bar, and it still has a lot of appeal to me. And other people that are not in the know don't seem to share it so much, but it'll always be precious to me.
I feel like we all shared that experience. I've never been in a theater before where people were cheering like that for a moment that was happening not live.
Me neither.
It was pretty incredible.
You guys were fantastic, man. That was really...
Do we have another question? Mike, did we have? Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, totally. Well, first of all, I just want to say, obviously, you guys both created something amazing separately and together, and I just commend you both. But you know, what you said, Ben, about how that one thing that Chris had in common with all artists that we can relate to, and I was wondering what that was going to be, you know, and it turned out to be the extraterrestrial thing. But one of the things that I thought of when we got to the end, I was like, oh, it's that you need an audience, you know, because sometimes you just can't bring it out until you have an audience, you know, whether it's theater or music or
Acknowledgement, right?
yes, or
Someone
even
to
a film when
appreciate.
it's already done. Like, you don't know if it works until you've got people who are going to experience it, and like that actually made it happen. But that's just that's not my question. Here's my question. This is kind of a practical question for you, Chris. In terms of physical regimen, I'm curious about you know, when you get to the point where you realize that part of your I don't want to say shtick, but your persona was being a small dude, not a huge dude, you know, who could do this stuff, and you know, Chris pointed that out, that like, you're gonna be this, you know, people are gonna be like, oh really, he can do that? Did that affect your weightlifting and bodybuilding and exercise regimen? Like, did you have to be conscious about, I need to get strong but not get big? Did that become a conscious thing?
I work very hard at trying to get big, and nothing.
Yeah. You should have the microphone.
I work very hard at being big, but nothing really happened. I've spent a lot of time in the gym. I certainly have gotten stronger, but I don't weigh any more than when I started in 1992 or whatever. So I do conventional stuff in the gym, but I don't think of my size in the gym. Other people may see what I lift in the gym and think of my size, but I don't. It's not something that I think about too much in the gym. It's a belief that I have the ability to communicate with the thing I'm bending. That sounds a little funny. It's definitely pain tolerance, and it's progressive. You start with stuff that's a little bit easier, and you have to buy lots of articles that you want to bend, and pull and pull and pull, and you feel the pain, and you learn to work through it, and you will get stronger and stronger, and your body toughens up, and all those things come together, and you get to the point where you know it's going to bend, and you just believe it, and you just put everything else out of your mind, everything that limits you, and you just pull and don't stop pulling until it's bent. And if you want to learn to bend steel, bend steel. That's the only way you could really train for it.
That's so metaphorical. You know, like
It's the truth. There's nothing else. I run into people in the gym that deadlift and squat incredible amounts of weight, and they can't bend a nail. I mean, it's gym activity and this are very separate. Gym activity complements this. It tends to build your tendon strength and whatnot. But to bend steel, you got to bend steel.
Do you have other questions? Anybody else want to come on over here?
I'm just curious if you've done any other 2-inch bars since then.
I did do 2-inch bars twice. One time I was doing a show in Manhattan, and somebody got up and challenged me on stage. And he was a strongman, and he trained with the band leader, and he failed. But I trained somebody who's related to him, all coincidental. So I said, look, I'm going to bend one of these 2-inch bars. You're going to film it, and you're going to send the film to the guy. And that's what he did. We've never heard from the guy since. And the second time I bent one was at a fellow strongman's house. And that's so far been it. It takes a lot out of you to bend that. I mean, there's a big difference between 1 3/4 inches and 2 inches. So I did it enough to know that it wasn't a mistake, and I did it with the same stock. So I know I indeed am satisfied.
I have 2 quick questions. As I'm watching you unpackage all the nails and steel, I'm wondering how much all this cost over the period of time. I know building materials and steel probably isn't cheap. Was it a significant financial commitment to be able to do this? And my second question is, what would you say to the people that might leave the theater and seek an encounter with a piece of metal, steel, or otherwise tonight? Would you dissuade them, or would you tell them to go for it?
That's a great question.
You got plans?
I don't know how I would answer, did I like the person or not? If it was somebody, you basically have to pull on a piece of steel as hard as you can and accept that it's not gonna move. And you gotta pull until you nearly pass out, and one day it'll start to give. You gotta make the jump. What was the other question, Jim?
Was it expensive?
Oh, how much the cost that I incurred. I would say probably I spend I don't know, now a little bit less that I have a relationship with a steel company.
He has a sponsor now. He has a sponsor.
But I would say between cards and horseshoes, it's $300 to $400. Shipping is a large part of that too. But I would say that if you want to be good at it and practice a lot, that's probably on balance what I'd spend. $300-400 a month, something like that.
Can you save it all? Do you get to decide?
Well, I tend to save it all because I put a date on it, and
You should see his store. That cage now is in Nava. You can't get through it.
it's
You
sort
can't move in there.
it's sort of
It's
like
piles.
sedimentary rock. The first few months I bent very light stuff, and it got thrown on the floor, and the stuff got more and more difficult. It sort of piles up. But each piece sort of has, most of the pieces have a date and a story, and I tend to write that down on the piece in marker, and I'm able to retrace my steps and figure out where I was and what state I was in at that time and how easily it bent. And so all those pieces take on some sort of meaning to me. To you, it's just probably scrap, but it means a little bit more to me than just that.
You have other questions? So I see quite a few hands going up. We're probably only going to be able to do a couple more, but if you want to come down here, Paul. Yeah, I know you. So.
Yeah, at one point in the film you mentioned someone that was rooting against you, and I was wondering if you wanted to elaborate on that anymore.
Well, I don't want to really disappoint you, but the answer is I don't care to elaborate on that because I'm not 100% sure I'm right. At that time, I feel I was right. I have a different, better, and a much better perspective on the whole thing now. That individual at that moment that I was referring to, it doesn't need any mentioning. I know who it is, and I just don't. I don't. That's just one thing that I just don't want to mention. So.
There was a comment by your parents earlier in the movie about how you would do something and then you would drop it afterwards. After you bent the 2-inch steel and performed it in front of people, did you lose any passion for it, or is it the same or more?
We're still here, right?
I have more passion for it now. That 2-inch bar, secured a little place for me in that community, I'm sure. And I continue to participate in it and progress and find other 2-inch bars and more difficult and different things to do. but it gave me a lot more enthusiasm. And so, in other words, I guess what you're saying is that was I working towards a 2-inch bar, and once I reached a 2-inch bar and it was done, end of story, move on to something else? No, a 2-inch bar, it was just the beginning, part of this sort of journey, which, as you can tell, according to some of those people, never ends. I mean, some of these guys are 93 and they're still going strong.
Oh, also steel bending though. I mean, steel bending in general. Do you know? Is it something that you think you might give up in the near future? Is that?
No, it's
let
not
go?
something I ever plan to give up. I can't think of anything I enjoy more. At least nothing with my clothes on.
Pure honesty right there. Doesn't get more honest.
So I do want to leave some time for a performance. I'm sure you guys want to see that as well. I have one question before we get there. What's going on in Coney Island? Has it progressed? I mean, are there more shows there now?
The show that you see in the film was the first show that happened at Coney Island, and it was inside the. I don't know if any of you have ever been to that part of New York, to Coney Island, but there's a small venue where people do sideshow acts, and it's been around there for years and years and years, and but now they have an annual Strongman show that happens in April. May happens in May, and they will be going on their 4th annual. So that show that you saw was the first.
That was the first show.
Yep.
May 18th.
May 18th will be the 4th annual Coney Island Strongman show, and it happens outside, and it's a day-long block party. They shut down the entire street. So these guys successfully brought the Strongman back to Coney Island. and
Nathan's Hot Dogs. First year we were planning on doing. I mean, they just thumbed their nose up at us, and they weren't interested in supporting us now. But now that they're interested in supporting us.
Oh, really?
Now
They're
they
sponsoring it this year? They might be.
They were all, I think, for the last 2 years.
Yeah, I'm like, huh? Yeah.
So.
Plug yourself too. Chris performs now as a strongman. So if any of you guys want to hire him at any point, ChrisWonderSheck.com.
Yeah. I do bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs and just general parties.
All right, I think, May 18th. I think I see a road trip coming on. I'm starting a Kickstarter, send Ben to Coney Island.
Nice.
So, without further ado, let's get this show on the road. I want to see some steel.
Yeah, I guess so.